Welcome everybody. My name is Roger Stinissen. My presentation is the title of my presentation is From Ugly Duck to Supercar. It's about my experiments with my team within ING, or with a couple of teams. But first, I will introduce myself. Well, my name, of course, Roger Stinissen, 43 years old. I have a wife and 2 kids. I have 20 years plus experience in testing. Currently, I'm a dev engineer at ING, but most of the time I'm involved in improvements in testing. Before I go to my story about my team, I first want to tell you some backgrounds about the situation we are in at ING. I think 6 or 7 years ago, we still had the waterfall methodology in our way of work. You also see the V model. So we started setting up requirements, documentation, and from there start deriving test cases. So actually we had a real good basis to start coding, but also to start setting up different kinds of tests. Well, that changed. In 2015, we also started working Agile, Devops, and from there, in the beginning we had testers, we had analysts, we had project managers, but when we started working in DevOps, we were told to or start coding or start maintaining the system. So we only had dev or ops engineers, and actually we got rid of testers of all those different kinds of functions, and testing was more kind of role. So the dev engineers should do the testing, and of course they were already aware of doing unit tests and maybe some other kinds of tests, maybe a bit of integration tests, but all the other stuff was new, and that was really a challenge for them. And that's also a bit the story about this team, but what I will tell you right now, because this was the situation when I was asked to join a team who was really underperforming in tests. So I just copied a screen of their test cases, and this is a test in Cucumber, in Gherkin notation. And actually, if you're looking at this, then you probably don't know what's happening around over there. And I had the same thing when I looked at this. I was asked because the team had not any clear documentation. They had not had any guidance in testing. There, as you can see, their Gherkin was more of a technical notation. They had issues in their test environments. Alignment within the team wasn't there. Also, no alignment with the stakeholders. And you had business, you had the engineers, and actually they did not know what they were doing from each other. So I dove into that team, and they had their unit test, and they had cucumber tests. And I was thinking, what the hell are cucumber tests? Because if you look at ICT Foundation, for instance, there's nothing there like cucumber tests. So what they actually had was some input from business, and they translated in a more technical way in a Gherkin notation, but they did not cover the real thing with the happy and the non-happy flows. So actually they had quite a lot of issues, and it caused a lot of incidents and also a large lead time in getting the stuff to production. And I was thinking, this is not probably this is not the team which has the most of the issues. Probably there are more teams. So I started developing a test maturity model, and in this model, I defined 7 different areas, and for each area, I have different checkpoints. Checkpoints are questions which I use to assess the team. And in this case, I assessed several teams because I thought that the issues with what I had with this team, most of the issues will also be in place with the other teams. And when I did the assessment, well, guess what? The outcome was indeed a lot of things the teams had in common. So I was thinking, okay, maybe I should think about having some experiments with different teams in look at what will happen with the teams if they are happy with those improvements, with those experiments, if it will gain any profit for the team or for the entire organization. So I started 4 different experiments, and the first experiment was implementing a test strategy for a team. In this case, I wanted to give the team more guidance in what they were doing and things they should not do, and also point out to the stakeholders what is done and what is not done. And we also wanted to have a shift left in testing, so we wanted to start already setting up the test cases at an early stage in the software development cycle. So in the beginning, I showed you the V model and where you start with requirements, documentation, and from there you start setting up the test cases. Well, in this case, I wanted to have it also in place by implementing a test strategy. But I don't want to call it a V model because that's old-fashioned. And with this, and we want to also to eliminate ongoing discussions in what you see at teams is that they start developing and then all the questions will pop up. So by implementing this strategy, we want to avoid that and also point out which kinds of test levels are done, which kind of test types, so the functional and the non-functionals, and also adding different techniques based on risk. And this really helped the teams out in avoiding a lot of discussions in this software development cycle. And yeah, this really saves a lot of time by implementing the test strategy. The other thing which I also experimented was adding contract testing, because I noticed that a lot of issues were popping up in the test environments with the alignment, with interfaces which were not thought as it should be. And with contract testing, you are enabling a test-driven development approach. So in this case, you identify your providers in a very early stage. You set up the contracts, so that's just an agreement of the interface, and then you focus on the interface for the happy flow, so the functional okay, the functional non-okay, and the technical error, and based on that, you create different tests. And this really enables autonomous testing, because you can also generate stops based on those contracts. And actually, this also kind of documentation which you generate and also have it upfront available for your team, but also for the stakeholders outside your team. And yeah, this really helped, because by doing this, we already caught a lot of issues in a very early stage of the development cycle, instead of when we deployed the software in the test environment. So this really speed up the team, and yeah, actually, in one case, we prevented an error going into production. The other experiment was having test technique in place. What I saw at a team is that for a small functionality, they had quite a lot of test cases, and most of them were double or even triple. And actually, they were doing the same thing over and over again. And if you have quite a lot of test cases, then it will also, and then you will also have the issue that you have a lot of maintenance to that. And by applying, in this case, you see an overview of the classification tree method, where there are more different kinds of techniques. And in this case, we applied it to a team. And by doing this, they got a real overview. Okay, what is possible, and what are the areas which can be covered in testing, and based on that, the team could decide. Okay, we want to have these kinds of test cases, and those extra test cases can be done when we have some extra time left, or maybe we don't want to do it at all. It's up to them, but at least they have the overview of what is possible, and from there they can choose their coverage. And yeah, if they have a if they have a process with a lot of risk, then they might apply different kinds of techniques to that, and also they have the possibility to do all the different cases. But by applying this, the team was really helped out in setting up the test cases, also cover a lot of non-happy flows, because that was lacking at this team. And the fourth experiment was applying example mapping. What I noticed is that when I was at a team at the refinement session, there was hardly any discussion between the engineers. It was just pokering and giving the points. There was an engineer giving for a user story 3 points, another engineer was giving 8 points. But the goal of the refinement is to have a discussion, to ask questions, to get the answers. And that did not take place. So I thought maybe it's a good idea to start example mapping for this team. And normally when you do example mapping, you start a Three Amigos session. So you have a tester, you have someone from business, and you have an engineer. And this test session will take about 20 minutes, where you put up your user story, define your business rule, and derive some examples. But when I started, I just thought, okay, maybe it's good to get the entire team into the session. And at the end, we ended up with no examples, of course. But it was good for the awareness, because they really got the feeling, okay, if I try to create some examples, ask some questions, get the answers, then it will be more clear to us. So we repeated it in the second and the third session, and I think maybe it was the fourth session that we actually came up with really good examples based on the business rules. And what I noticed is that the team was really happy with this approach, because now they really understood what they should test and what they should develop. And by having those examples, they actually had covered their acceptance criteria, because in the beginning they weren't aware that they should have acceptance criteria. And business and IT was, they were at the same level. They had the same idea about what should happen. It was a really proper basis now to develop and to test. And because we're already writing down those examples in feature files, we could already add it to Git, and it was the starting point in setting up the code and doing your test. And because we also have the code and the test and the feature files in Git, it was always actual. It was always clear what happened. And now we're at the stage that the team is promoting this to also other teams, and some team members move to other teams, and they are also introducing this to other teams, and also start doing example mapping, but also start doing test techniques, also trigger the teams for the test strategy. And what we see now is that as a result is that we have very clear test cases now formulated within different teams. So business and IT now have a common understanding, not only within this team, but also in, I think, 10, 11 other teams now. The test cases are now with the code, so it's always versioned, it's also actual, and it's not only on the acceptance level done, it's also done now on the integration part for the contract testing, also on the system level. And what we see is that the satisfaction and the energy of the teams is now getting up, and they are spreading the word. In the past, we saw that testing and documenting was not a word or a thing people really like, because when we started doing Agile, the credo was coding first, having working software, and then start about having good documentation. But we noticed that there wasn't any documentation at all. And by doing this, we now have some example teams who have really done a good job and having good documentation, good test cases, but also good quality software. And we hardly see any incidents anymore now in production. And what also helps is because we have quite a lot of changes within teams. If someone new, if a new person enters into a team, then we just give the feature files or the test cases to the new engineer, and within one day he knows how everything works. And yeah, that's really a major change and a major improvement within the teams. And from this, we also want to spread it out to the entire organization. And luckily, our management started a new program. It's called Next Gen. And we also embedded now in our way of work. So I made this figure and put in all the different phases, different test levels of testing, the types, but also our way of work. So the BDD, the acceptance test-driven development, and the test-driven development, if you go to a lower level, it's all in this overview. So we now start, we get our requirements on an epic level. From there, we start deriving it into system or user requirements. We refine it. We get our acceptance criteria and examples, which is the basis for our acceptance test. And from there, we start deriving tests on different levels like system, integration, and units. And yeah, it's a iterating process. So we get our fast feedback on every level. And yeah, this is really the way we are heading to, not only for these small amount of teams, which I already mentioned, 10 or 11 teams, but we also want to implement it globally within ING. And currently, I'm just working out now the way of work for ING, and also get support from the one pipeline, because you can figure everything out. But at the end, you also want to have it up and running in the pipeline. So I get support from our engineering platform, and they are now helping us out in setting this up. So start with the backlog, start your testing, or start setting up your feature files. From there, start the coding of your application, but also start coding your automated test. And from there, we can go to production, get the feedback of our customer, and from there start adding new features to that, and also at the same moment have our documentation updated and let our stakeholders know, okay, this is what we have, and this is the thing we will do in the upcoming period. Now, summary for what we noticed within this approach, this way of work. As I already mentioned, by doing this, by having a test strategy implemented, we give our teams guidance in testing, but also give our stakeholders the guidance. By having example mapping implemented, and And by having those gherkins, we have a high involvement now from business. And we're not there yet that business is writing the test cases by themselves. But that's actually the thing we are heading to. So we want them to formulate the test cases, share it with their stakeholders, with the team, and also at the end we want them to execute them by themselves. And because of this high commitment, this good cooperation with business, with the team, with doing the test, documenting at the beginning of this software development cycle, we see also that the lead time to production is smaller than in the past. And it also leads to less incidents. We get faster feedback from the team, but also from our customers. We have always up-to-date tests. And yeah, this resulted also in our own living documentation, which is always up-to-date. And as I already mentioned, this documentation, which was in the past on different internet sites, or maybe in someone's mailbox or on a share, window share location, now we have it all in Git with the code. It's always actual and it's always accessible for the team. And our next steps will be implementing the test strategy widely, so globally for every team. Also for the way of work, because the test strategy and way of work are in line with each other. Having our engineers educated in testing. So we also want to have our engineers educated in ICT Foundation. And we already said maybe we should also educate the business people in ICT Foundation, or at least have them involved in how to set up proper requirements, how to do the example mapping sessions, or the way of work in behavior driven development. And last but not least, of course, we want to have a good, smooth pipeline. So our engineers are now busy in supporting the different kinds of tooling we want to use in the pipeline, and also want to have the traceability in place. And that's mainly now what we want to set up the upcoming months or years to set it up widely within ING. So if you have any questions, you can contact me. This is my mail address. You can also connect to me at LinkedIn. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Roger, for sharing this talk and taking us along on this journey you made at ING. Well, I said questions can be posted through mail and LinkedIn, but I also got a few questions for you I'd like to ask. In the beginning of your talk, you were talking about starting off with what they called cucumber tests, which were really on technology, but not actually being BDD tests and therefore not being living documentation.
Yes.
Well, I see this quite a common pitfall when working with BDD and Gherkin. So I was wondering, did you put anything in place to prevent this from happening again in the future?
No. Well, what I see, we still have quite a lot of teams who are using Cucumber and not doing it in a right way. What we want to do is we started this next gen program. And from there, we set up the way of work and spread the word. And we want to educate people in doing the proper things. So setting up your gherkins in the correct way, and also doing BDD as it is meant to be. So we are now in contact with our IT Academy. And together we want to set up a bunch of different trainings to help the teams out in doing this kind of way of work.
Okay, so education is key there.
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Well, you also said you introduced example mapping to the teams and decided to have these sessions not with the entirety of, not with just 3 amigos, but with the entire teams. And you also said, well, we needed 3 or 4 sessions to get to the actual examples. But I assume that's not ideal for the long term. So were you planning on going back to 3 amigos, or have you found other ways to make that process a bit more effective, efficient?
Yeah, actually, the team is already doing it in its 3 amigos session. But as you noticed, probably we don't have any testers within ING. So we have dev or ops engineer who are fulfilling the role in testing. So I was looking in the beginning, okay, how should I pick this up? And that's why I thought, okay, maybe it's the right way to involve everybody at the same time and involve the entire team. Because if I only pick 3 people, then people might think, okay, what they are doing in there, and I like to be open into that. So I involved everybody, and I knew already this will not work out. And from there, we started doing this, and now we're doing it with just 3 people for that team. But it could be the case that if we want to do it with new teams, that we have the same issues again. But then they have a reference with this team and also other teams now. So they know which teams are doing it already, and they can get the information from them. And before we do it with teams on a larger scale, we will inform them and also do some kind of kickoff or educational part. And from there, we can start doing it directly with 3 people at the same time.
Okay, thank you. So back to 3 amigos again.
Yes.
You just said, well, we don't really have any testers anymore. Well, your talk was really about the testing part of living documentation. Is there anything you do to prevent it to be just test, but also requirements and well, actually living documentation used to create a shared understanding?
Yes, actually, we are piloting training for setting up requirements at the business side. So, because we noticed that also from the assessments that engineers got their user story and they just actually started working on, and it wasn't clear enough, actually. So during the development or testing of user story, a lot of questions popped up, and we want to educate the business side, so the product owners and customer journey experts or product managers, in setting up the correct user stories with acceptance criteria, with the proper requirements. And actually, we are running at the moment already proof of concept with different trainings within the organization.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's all I've got. Well, I heard you talk a lot about education, etc. So I think you also educated us a bit. So I would really like to thank you for sharing this talk with us. As said, if there are any other questions, they can reach you through email or LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So thank you, Roger.
Thank you for your time.